Last Man Home. On the Sky Road. Written by John Miro. 14. The End. There we were. Counting my new friend, former Sky Road security officer Priya Whitaker, we were 5 vets standing around a deserted terminal in the middle of the night. Just waiting on one more friend. One last friend the Sky Road lawyers had insisted be escorted out separately from us. One last friend who was probably more than a little scared. The Sky Road's famous hospitality had run out where me and my friends were concerned, and we were all from indigenous species. To distract myself from the wait, I watched Whitaker put her hands in the front pockets of her jeans and shrug. "Thanks for putting me up. I think I'll be waiting a while before I see any back pay from the Sky Road." "It's fine," Gris grunted while I tried to limit my appreciation for her civilian appearance before it became a full-on drool. "We could use a local guide." The cocky grin on Whitaker's face altered. "Not sure I'm gonna be a lot of good there. I had to skip shore leaves whenever we pulled in to Gaulis." Teddy waddled up to her. "Doesn't matter. You need a place to stay, we'll cover it. Least we can do for a brother." "Sister," I muttered, taking an appreciative tour of Whitaker's jean-sheathed southern parts. By the time I got my eyes up again, I saw her taking the same tour of me and apparently appreciating right back. "Point is, you're one of us now," Teddy assured her. "You don't even have to ask." "Want to promise her anything else while you're at it?" Gris squeaked. "Line of credit? Clothing allowance?" "Seriously, guys," Whitaker interrupted. "This is a rough planet, and you might not want to mention me too much." She fixed a gaze on Gris. "I appreciate the help. And then I'll get out of your hair." Drew hooted and flicked a tentacle toward Gris's marshmallowy bald scalp. Gris deked away from the tentacle, grabbed it, and pinched. "Really?" The Samadon, almost 3 times Gris's size, hooted again, higher pitched this time, and skittered backwards, rubbing his tentacle when Gris finally let him go. He turned back to me and Whitaker. "I'll front you a room for 2 weeks. Then we'll see where we are." I held up a finger and gave Whitaker some epic side-eye. Gris interrupted me before I could get a word out. "Your own room?" He leaned toward her. "Jake snores worse than Drew. Give it 1 night and I think you'll be ready for that room." Whitaker had a look on her face I'd never seen before. Unsure. Unsettled. "It's a loan." "No. You know we owe you that much." Gris held out his pudgy little hand. "You keep sleeping in that room after the 2 weeks, we'll start calling it a loan." Drew and Teddy came closer. "We all owe you," Teddy said, and I heard a little self-loathing remained over what had gone down with Drew while Teddy had sat right beside him. "Could sell a tentacle or 2 and split the take," Drew offered. "You're one of us, but prettier." It could have been a trick of the low light, but I'd swear Priya Whitaker's eyes looked a little wet as she looked over my friends and searched for the words. Just then I heard a scuffling behind us in the Sky Road airlock and turned to see more guards piling out to join the ones that had escorted us. There's one last thing you really should—" "I know who you're traveling with," she interrupted me. "Security, remember?" "Yeah," I said, drawing the word out. "Knowing is one thing. Seeing is another." I dropped my voice. "He's one of the good guys. He was a POW during the war, not a combatant. And he risked his life just to get to us, and risked it again to save us when—" My eyes jerked involuntarily towards Drew, but Whitaker filled the hesitation. "I know this isn't the war, and I have seen friendlies do a lot of wrong things in the time since." She craned her neck around to fix each of us with a look that said respect, brotherhood, trust. "If you vouch for him, I'm good." Then the cocky grin came back. "Besides, if you testosterone jarheads can accept getting your asses saved by a clink, clink, clink." I whipped my head around at the sound. Coming down the ramp, sandwiched between a dozen soldiers to the front and the rear, came the most peaceful creature I'd ever met in my life. In chains, lit up by targeting lasers. Blue chitin, spikes, eyeballs swiveling nervously on stalks, human-style cast on his cracked thorax and arm, improvised prisoner shackles around his body limiting the range of his 3 sets of limbs. "Jake?" Tom asked, his voice warbling with what all of us knew was fear. "What is happening?" The guards in front of us shouted at us to keep back, then spilled to either side of the ramp. Some big man behind Tom literally poked him with a 10-foot pole. An electrified pole, apparently. Tom screamed and fell. I had to let him fall. The spikes along his back and covering every joint all dripped reeking poison when he got scared. "Your bug stinks," spat the new security chief from halfway up the ramp. The coward had put himself as far as he could get from Tom, right at the back of the line. "You might want to find a place to hide before the light of day. Local's gonna tear him up at first sight." He chuckled. "Hope someone vids that. I'd like to watch him go hard, up on a big screen." I didn't even realize that I'd been getting ready to charge the fat piece of shit when Whitaker's elbow pounded into me. "Big, tough chief." She got between us and treated him to a slow clap of applause. "Way to lead from behind, Carl." Carl's eyes narrowed, but he'd clearly exhausted his stock of witty comeback. "Get up that ramp," he shouted at the scaredy cats with badges, and they went, and he waddled up after them. "You okay, buddy?" I said, making eye contact before I knelt beside Tom. I tried to keep all my angry horses in the barn for his sake. A few of his eyes found me, and Tom's trembling eased, slowing the pace of the hammer-like tapping of his claws against the hard floor. I do not think they liked me. He started to lift himself on his 3 sets of upper limbs, but they gave out and he flopped back down. "Who cares?" I told him, spreading my stance and bracing myself to help the Elotan up. "We like you fine, buddy." Tom weighed more than 2 of me, fully geared up for a mission and then some. But no way was I letting him tremble on the ground in front of those assholes. I turned to call for an assist from Drew, but he was already beside me, tapping Tom on the back and murmuring something kind and quiet. Teddy and Chris were on the other side of Drew. They were tough and all, but they just didn't have the mass to hold up their end of our friend. I opened my mouth to say just that, but Priya was already talking, on the other side of Tom, mirroring my stance and waving at Tom's eye stalks. "Need a hand, Tom?" Tom's eye stalks swayed toward me. I nodded. The stalk swayed back. "I would be most grateful for the assistance, miss." She smiled, her face a little tight, but trying. "Sergeant's fine," she said. She put a hand on one of his forearms, and her face loosened up. I knew why. He was still trembling. Whitaker was one of the good ones. She couldn't stand to see any little shit in pain. Or Whitaker, or Priya. She waved at assorted claws and spikes. "You good? I don't particularly want to die before I jump your friend there." She wiggled her eyes at me. "Or, ever." "I am good." The spikes angled down ever so slightly. I grabbed hold. Priya grabbed hold. We counted 3 and got Tom back on his big insectoid feet. He wavered a bit. Tentacles and a lizard's tail wrapped around his legs and waist. He stayed on his feet. I smiled across Tom's chest. "See? Not so bad." Whitaker smiled back and knocked on Tom's glistening blue upper arm. "Don't get full of yourself, Sarge." I narrowed my eyes, feeling a little flirty and a little competitive. "So when were you commissioned?" She laughed. "Trying to figure out who's on top already, huh?" "Is that precoital negotiation?" Tom asked our buddies. "Are they flirting?" "Yeah, very badly," Teddy hiss-laughed. "Can we find him a room already? I'll get the luggage," Drew called out happily. "Go easy with it," Gris shouted at him. "I got a couple bottles in there, probably better than anything they brew on this godforsaken." The rest melted into a garbled muttering as we all headed toward the door. We found the door, and it opened for us. Apparently customs had been prearranged. Of course it was raining outside, and it stunk like an industrial/agricultural colony should. Methane and something worse. "Cow farts," Teddy hissed, completing my thought. Yep, that was it. The road was empty, but Gris spotted some hotel brand names floating in the air above some taller buildings not far away. We made our way down the road. Mercifully, Tom took most of his weight back pretty quick. Elotans were tough, just like Samadon. Maybe tougher. I worried about how many volts he'd taken. Tom was an alien that nobody in the human systems knew how to treat if he really got sick. I still wondered why a phalanx of government bureaucrats and federal agents hadn't whisked him away yet every morning. The human race had spent most of a generation fearing extinction from his kind, after all. The street stayed empty as we closed in on the first hotel building. I was glad for that. We'd known bringing Tom here was going to present some difficulties, and that was before we almost got Drew delisted as a merc and Whitaker fired, and ourselves and a few other 1,000 sentients almost blown up. "I need a drink," Whitaker groaned as we walked into the bright but equally empty hotel lobby. "Drew, crack open Gris's stash," I called out. "I got it," Whitaker grunted, and I heard a luggage seal click open. "Just one bottle," Gris bleated as he signed us in at the automated desk terminal. I slumped on the wall across from the elevator, waiting for Gris to finish up, and made gimme motions at the bottle. A healthy slug later, I passed the bottle down to Teddy. Alcohol. Truly the universal language of peace. "So," I asked Whitaker as she parted her lips to take her second swig. "Commission date?" I prompted her. She laughed. The elevator dinged. My friends and I called it a night. Last Man Home. On the Sky Road. Written and recorded by John Miro. There's more where that came from at servingworlds.com.